Okay. We're running. So, how do we want to do this? Do we want to just explain what we're doing?
Well, I'm Stephanie,
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I'm Jeff.
and we just watched Supernatural season 1, episode 1, entitled Pilot.
Spent a lot of time naming that one.
I have watched all of the seasons of Supernatural. There's 15 seasons, and I'm pretty sure I watched seasons 1 through 5 at least 3 times. And it's definitely one of my favorite shows. And Jeff has seen nothing of Supernatural up until tonight.
Up until tonight. Never seen it at all, but this is not just a supernatural experience. We made a deal.
We made a deal. Lord help me.
That was you or me.
He's going to watch all of Supernatural in exchange for me watching 15 seasons of Star Trek.
An equal number of seasons.
Equal number of seasons.
Which is 15.
Of Star Trek, which are to be determined which seasons of Star Trek. I've got the easy job, I think, in terms of, hey, hit play on Supernatural and go. He has to decide what seasons I'm going to watch. He's a Trekkie. I'm not. My previous experience is watching 2 seasons of Star Trek Discovery, aka Disco.
There you go.
I guess. And I did enjoy it. I binged the crap out of it in the beginning, but then just kind of fell off. And I don't remember too much from it, but I do remember that I really liked it enough to binge it at first. And I don't exactly remember why I stopped watching. But long story short, too long didn't read. We're watching episodes of TV. My favorite show, basically, not versus his favorite show, but my favorite show and his favorite show, watching each other's favorite shows, basically. And we started with Supernatural because that was the easy start.
Yeah. By the way, we're dating. This is the relevance here. I have always tried to get her into my world of Star Trek wonderfulness. And I've tried to catch up with her Supernatural world, including my sister-in-law, who is a huge Supernatural fan.
Shout out to Christy!
And all kinds of different references that I get to catch without actually having watched it. So that's where we are, and we made a deal to experience each other's world. I guess the other factor worth mentioning is I am forever and forever a sci-fi nerd. So there's a lot of different things, shows, series that I've seen, but also the thing that you bring to the table.
I was about to say, I thought that's what you were going to say, but...
Yeah, I wanted to put my part in first. But you work in TV and film.
Yes.
I'm going to gloat on you pretty high up, but I'm not going to say who or what or where. But it does create a very interesting TV watching experience when you work with the people that make these shows, literally the actual individuals. And it makes a very interesting perspective watching these shows with you because you see things that people don't see. You have insights that people don't insight.
We don't have to be secretive. I just have to remember to not give things away, but I'm a key second AD in the film and TV industry, mostly in the New York City area, working mostly in TV, and we can maybe get into that a little bit sometime otherwise. But spoiler alert, I'm not great at spoilers, so I'm gonna do my best here. It was also difficult to watch the episode with him without explaining things. It was also interesting to watch this episode for the first time since I've gotten into the industry in a real way. Pretty sure that I haven't watched it since really being in the industry. So that it was an interesting perspective to have from that. But yeah, I guess we can jump in on that segue right into the episode. So I'm dying to hear.
You are really, really interested in getting in.
Well, because we weren't. The whole thing was we didn't want to talk about it off air. I wanted it to be all organic on air. So I didn't ask any questions.
Yeah.
I didn't ask any questions or ask for his impressions or anything like that. Let's edit that in post.
Yeah, we'll cut that in post.
Steven!
So yeah, the whole idea that we've got here is I pitched this to you a little over an hour ago at this point because we had talked about trading our shows. And as a Christmas present, I almost went through Winchesters on Christie's advice, but found out, in retrospect, that would have been a terrible idea. So it's just been one of those things that we've always talked about doing, but never really gone through and done it. And for anybody who may be listening that is a Trekkie, you can understand the weight and the pressure of only getting 15 seasons to get someone to fall in love with a show. But otherwise, I'm really excited about the experience. And we kicked around 9 months ago watching a different show and then doing reactions because I think that our conversations about the dynamics were really amazing.
This is us.
Yes, we were talking about...
The actors do it much better than we do.
Right. We were talking about doing a rewatch of This Is Us until we found out that the actors were doing it themselves. So, bail. But also the idea, one of the things that kept us at the time from doing that is the fact that you do work in the industry, and those are insane hours. Mm-hmm. The difficulty of really finding the time to do it, we didn't want to commit to something that we couldn't follow through with. And so now we have been together, lived together for a while, and have a much better understanding about what our routine looks like as a couple. And I think that we've got a very safe space to be able to watch show or shows and take our time and go through this experience, but also to share it because I have never seen Supernatural. And other than 2 seasons of Discovery, you've never seen Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And there's an entire world that I am geeked to all ends to show you, unbridled. And I am so terrified you're not going to love it. But I can see a million reasons why you would love it. But I can also imagine that there's something very similar on the Supernatural side.
I think that you're going to like it, though I'm a little nervous about your impressions of the pilot because pilots are hard. They're really hard, especially when you're introducing an entire world. And I feel for writers when they're trying to not only create a world, but like literally a world, like one that's not based in reality, that is like Harry Potter or Star Trek or Supernatural is not based in the real world in a lot of ways. So you're building that world while also trying to introduce you to the world of like the main characters, Sam and Dean, and how they came to be and their dynamics and their life and everything. So you're trying to, it's very difficult. There's a lot of, I forget what they call it, but you're giving an entire backstory of life in dialogue. And if you pay attention too closely, you're like, these 2 brothers would not have this conversation because this is like, they lived it. They don't need to talk about it, but you have to explain it to the audience. So I am a little nervous on your thoughts on the pilot. A, because it's 2005, 2006. We should actually have a research person to know if it's 2005.
I thought about doing it. You were just so excited about getting into this recording that I didn't get to do the backfield.
Don't come for me if it's 2005, 2006. It's one of those 2 years. Okay, don't come for me. I'll have a corrections corner later. We can all laugh about it. But
we'll get the PAs involved next episode.
But we'll have a research assistant.
There we go.
But you know, the ability of visual effects back then was not what it is today, of course. So little things to laugh at.
The heart was there.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And so not only the visual effects, but also the writing, not that it's bad, but it's just a difficult task. It's really difficult. So it's almost like I want you to see the pilot plus the next, because the next is going to be a lot less of that. It's going to be much more like the Supernatural that all of us Supernatural fam have come to know and love. The pilot is special in our hearts because it kicked it all off, but it's definitely not the indicator of how the rest of the show was written in a lot of ways because of all of the necessary backstory and narrative that has to be thrown in there for the audience to understand what the heck is going on. So, but I am excited, and I'm also excited for me to rewatch it as well. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of pumped about that. So then I guess anything else, premises, rules about this thing that we've talked about doing? I guess it's worth mentioning that there will definitely be spoilers, but at this point with all of these shows, we're talking about 8 or 9 different Star Trek series plus Supernatural. If you haven't seen it at this point, it's on you, but we will be discussing episodes.
Yeah, and don't come here for straight up facts. We're not a fact-based show. If you came here for facts, you need to go somewhere else. But yeah, I don't think so. I had a thought, but it went on my brain. ADHD.
Okay, so then is there anything else background, or should we jump in?
How many minutes are we at?
11.
How long do we think these are going to be?
As long as they need to be.
I mean, I don't think...
Listeners can tell us how long they want them to be, but since there are 0 listeners at this point in time, we can go as long as we want.
Yeah. It's just also like how much is too much, and how much will this kind of slowly come out over time organically. I don't know if there's anything else relevant. I mean... Yeah. I don't think so. We also can cut this part out where we're thinking.
I feel like we should just get into it.
Okay. Oh, I got a rule.
Okay. Rules, I like it.
Driver picks the music. Shotgun shuts his K-Cole. See, now you finally know where that comes from. I've been quoting that to him for years. And now he's finally going to know where that comes from. And not only that, but all the other supernaturalisms that I've like brought up without him knowing, he's going to understand the references now. It's exciting, guys. It's really exciting.
Supernaturalisms.
I actually just made that up. I don't think I've ever heard that. I'm sure somebody else has said it before me, but it's not an actual like hashtag thing that people say.
Well, I feel like in true season 1 spirit, we should go to the library and Google it to see if we can we can find if it's been used before.
Is that where you want to start?
True supernaturalisms. No, I liked it. I liked it as a pilot. I mean, if anybody is not a fan of Jeffrey Dean Morgan, then they can just go ahead and unfollow from here because they're not welcome.
I have hard eyes for Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Well, I do too.
He got me back into Walking Dead, which is a whole separate show, but I'd stopped watching.
He is still Negan day in and day out for me, but also he is the only other person I've run into that spells his name like I do. My name is actually Jeffrey.
That's literally...
R-E-Y.
That's literally not true. We went over this. I've looked up all of the famous Jeffreys, and almost every single one of them spells it the way that you do. No. And then you finally consented when I sent you the list, and you said, fine, okay, I get it. Guys, come for him, please. You need to come for him. Spell your name right now.
Because the standard is the giraffe. The Toys R Us Jeffrey, and that's with a G, so it immediately threw off my whole world.
That's not the standard. That's abnormal.
Have you seen how tall he is?
I know a lot more Jeff with a J's than I do Jeff with a G's.
Okay, well, either way. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is a genius because he spells his name R-E-Y. That's the point.
That's how most Jeffreys spell it.
And he was in the first 20 seconds. So automatic endearment also being a first 3 seasons of Grey's Anatomy fan, but after that they can burn. But he was in there as well.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he did great. He had a love interest. But he's just phenomenal. And they pulled him in the first 30 seconds of the episode, and then no more after that.
He'll come back.
I knew we were going to have this trouble. I knew it. I knew it.
But listen. That's not a full-on spoiler, right? Because
15 minutes into the first episode, and she already spoiled it.
Well, first of all, you already knew that, though, because I told you that Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in Supernatural.
Yeah, and I saw him. So check. We were done.
No, because that would not count really as being a Supernatural. That he literally had like 4 lines in
Yeah,
the
but
whole
it's Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Yeah, so he's going to come back.
It would be like if Lawrence Fishburne were in it, and you could say Lawrence Fishburne were in
He would never
Supernatural.
do just that, though. He's Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
But this was 2005/2006.
Maybe that's fair, but he's still Jeffrey Dean Morgan. He's not going to do and this is where the film industry thing comes in. Maybe. I don't know. You might actually know this as well. Actually, most people probably know this. But if you see like a main, like, A-lister type on your screen, you know they're not going to be there for just like 4 lines. You know that there's going to be more to it than that. When we saw Colby in Shrinking, I was like, nope, there's going to be more to this girl. She's not going to be this girl that's selling her car and that's all there is to it. There's going to be more to this girl. Because Colby would not take a role that's just for that.
There's a small little subtext, by the way, is that Stephanie uses these celebrities on a first-name basis.
Except for Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Except for Jeffrey Dean Morgan. That's entirely different. But she'll be like, yeah, you know, when Jennifer and I were talking, I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, oh, well, obviously Jennifer Lopez. Yeah, well, you're the only one. Everybody else calls her Jennifer Lopez or J-Lo. But no, for you, it's just Jennifer, like she's any other Jennifer. So anyway.
Regardless, the point is you would not see Jeffrey Dean Morgan just have that as his full run of show.
Yeah, but again, I counter that I didn't know how big or small of an actor he was in 2005, 2006.
Whatever. You're overplaying this. You knew he was in this show, like, in a real way.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No. Either way.
I don't believe you.
We're 15 minutes into the first episode of the first season of the first show in this presumably innocent podcast, and spoilers have already been dropped. So
all right.
I'm sorry.
Get over it.
I'm just waiting, because everything that happens on this end, I get to reciprocate.
Oh, I don't care about spoilers, though. I ask you for them, and you refuse to give them to me.
Yeah, but play my game.
Why would I do that?
Yeah,
do you not know me?
Right. Trek fans, just wait. We'll get our time in the sun. It'll come back around. So anyway, we get through the first scene, and the roof burns. Story of no smoke detectors in houses. And Mom's gone. Sam's a baby. Dean is a small child who is apparently remembering every single detail of the situation. And Mom has been stapled to the ceiling. I kind of liked it. It was nice. It was fun. It was very intriguing. It was very attention grabbing. Obviously, they had my attention to begin with, because you and I have been talking about Supernatural since before we started dating. So there was already an intrigue in understanding the show, but it was really good. It still had that mid-2000s vibe, for sure. Way too zoomed in. Everything's dark. We had 3 or 4 times during the episode where I'm thinking, why is it always so dark in here? There was a diner. No, our apartment is different.
Uh-huh.
This is ambient, mid-January, New York City, Sunday night, with snow outside. This is ambient. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had hot chocolate. That's why.
It's dark.
It's kind of dark in here. But as far as television, they had diners and all the windows were covered, and like there's very little natural light coming in. Like everybody was like half lit, half shaded on their face, which was definitely mid-2000s cinematography.
I wonder if they were shooting day for night, though.
And for the rest of us, you'll tell us what that means.
Well, you're right, they were covering the windows with it. If it was night outside, but for the script, they needed it to be daytime. But they shoot in Vancouver, and depending on what time of year they were shooting at, maybe they ran out of daylight, and so they covered the windows and blasted light from the outside to make it look like day. Maybe. I'm speculating.
That's what day for night means?
Yeah, it's when you're shooting basically the opposite of what is actually happening outside. So it could also be night outside, or no, also be day outside and you're trying to shoot night.
So you're blocking as much sunlight as possible and mimicking moonlight or street light coming in. Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. I didn't know that.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but that's definitely one reason why sometimes you might see peculiar things like that.
But it seemed like the whole episode, though, in this case. That's fascinating. But in this case, it felt like every single scene in the episode was like lit half face, shadow remaining half.
Supernatural is definitely a more cinematic look of the show, for sure. And cinematic and it has a certain look to it, as opposed to like I don't know, a sitcom where it's all just kind of lit the same way the whole time. Supernatural has definitely a different, what's the word? Ambiance? Vibe? I don't know. There's a word, a cinematic word that's escaping me at the moment. But I would
call it cinematic.
I went to film school a long time ago, guys. These words aren't in my brain vocabulary anymore.
Yeah, well.
They've been replaced with copy that and 10-1.
Well, I was also raised on television by a single mom, so I am equally as qualified. Lines.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you have any more thoughts you want to share before I?
Yeah, the Shuts is Cake hole. Actually, I do have. I keep notes. So I've got a little pad of paper over here. Yeah, the Shuts is Cake hole is actually a funny line, and it was as soon as I started looking into like what can I learn about Supernatural to impress this girl, and how can I be relevant. That line came up immediately.
The classic.
And the fact that it came up in the pilot was surprising. I hope it has recurrence. I hope it becomes a thing, but I'm intentionally not looking at Stephanie right now to avoid the spoilers because I still want to be surprised. I don't want the answer to that question quite yet. However, cassette tapes, I'm mildly being judgmental here.
Well, in 2005, it was also like Dean was being judged on his cassette tapes.
Yeah, true. True, and they clarified. They made the joke, but even more so. I'm just doubling down on that.
But they're also driving around in a 67 Impala.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a 67.
Oh, you'll figure
Another spoiler.
You'll know.
Unbelievable.
No, it's not a spoiler. You will come to know the 67 Impala, otherwise known as Baby.
Yeah, that is the thing. I feel like I have met 4 characters at this point because Mom's gone. So we've got Dad, Sam, Dean, and the car. It feels like the car was very intentional. I knew that the car was a thing, and so when Jeffrey D. Morgan, I don't know Dad's character name quite yet, but when he was carrying in the flashback at the very, very beginning, bringing the baby out, I saw the car, like, okay, that looks, it's background, but it looks very, very intentional. But then you see the car make all of these different appearances in the pilot. I'm like, okay, they've set this car aside, and then whenever the car went all Christine on the bridge, a la Stephen King, I knew. Like, so we've made 4 characters.
So, fun fact about the car, when Eric Kripke, the creator of Supernatural, who is also the creator of The Boys, which is currently airing, and Revolution. So if you're into either of those shows, you should check out Supernatural because Eric Kripke is an evil genius who... And I say that with love because he gave a lot of us Supernatural family like heart attacks and like anxiety and needed to go to therapy in the best way. But he
Any show does.
so fun story is that when they were trying to decide what car these brothers drive around, I think a Mustang was originally pitched, or maybe that's what Eric Kripke had said he wanted, maybe. But then somebody else brought up the Impala and said something to the effect of, you can fit, a whole dead body and more, or something like that. Like something about how big the trunk of that car is and how many dead bodies you could fit in it or something. And so that like kind of made... again, don't come here for facts, okay? But it was something around dead bodies in the trunk of the Impala, Chevy Impala, being like the seller of why this car needs to be for these boys. And then
for the behind the scenes on that one.
And then also Jensen Ackles, who plays Dean, pretty sure he ended up buying the car. There was multiple babies. Baby is the car. That's the name of the car. There are multiple of them because they crash it. They crash it in this episode, right? So they have to have multiple Impalas in order to create the show the way that it is. And one of them, probably not the junker that they crash, Jensen bought it, and he now owns it. I don't think Jared bought one. I'm pretty sure it's just Jensen. Don't come here for facts. But I know Jensen has one.
What do you mean they crashed it?
They crashed it into the house.
Oh, I didn't know that counted.
Take me home.
Yeah, all right, fine. Yeah. I don't even think they really crashed it. I mean, that's just driving through an old dilapidated living room.
It's still crashing. Would you drive your brand new car into that house?
Yeah, totally.
Uh-huh.
It was a rundown rickety front porch, man. You just go right through it.
Well, if you damage that car, Dean will kill you.
Yeah, that's what I've heard while shutting my cake hole. So, I mean, is it even worth talking about the storyline?
I was just about to say,
Are we just assuming that everybody's seen it?
That's the thing. That's my. I was literally just thinking, like, are we supposed to be talking about plot points so that people
official executive decision
around
that will follow?
I don't know. I think we just go with what feels right.
I think we should just assume that anybody who is listening has seen it.
Yeah, probably.
They paused and saw it.
Yeah.
Like if we've got some Trekkies that are knowing how much you're about to fall in love with this show. There we go. Or Supernatural fans that are like, what's a nerd who catches up on the best show ever made going to think? Feel we should just have the assumption that anybody's seen it at this point.
I think so.
So maybe we don't need to go through the dialogue. But I am curious, because I noticed things like lighting, staging, the fact that they rolled out everybody immediately and they really got into the storyline as opposed to holding back plot points. Like, exactly what does the pilot, from somebody who's internal, what exactly does the pilot look like from a logistics standpoint? Because pilots always have an era of feeling different. Like the big shows, the ones that have gone on for the long run, the pilots always hit different. So what exactly makes them different from a logistics standpoint as opposed to, especially in the 80s, 90s, 2000s shows, which we're going to explore a lot of, that people were turning over a new show every week?
I mean, pilots are obviously going to be different than any other episode of TV because you have to put it all together. I mean, you have to find your leading actors and actresses, and you've got to establish things like what kind of car do they drive. You have to establish things like what does this world look like from a production design standpoint. They were in this hotel room with like serial killer paraphernalia all over the walls, like articles and photos of deceased people and all of that, which gets Dean into a bit of trouble because that's where they catch him. But you have to establish all those things. And once they're established, then the goal of everyone there out is to continue to try and match it. It doesn't have to be exact match, but like you can't go from Sam and Dean are staying in these dingy motel rooms to they're staying in 5-star resorts in episode 2. So you have to. The world has to be decided for the pilot. Everything has to be decided for the pilot. It's going to set the tone for the rest. I would say not for all shows, but for most shows, it sets the tone for the rest of the run of the show.
So were these things like studio executives, actors, writers, etc.? They had these conversations. Is there a punch list of things that need to be decided at this point, or is just whoever thinks of bringing that up? Because I mean, I work in marketing. This sounds like branding. These things are clarified. These things are brought up. Like who brings those up? Is there a standard of defining that, or do you decide what it is? Because I'm thinking about us getting into Trek later, and I can imagine that a lot of those conversations were had about what does this particular version of the future look like. This is what we do now. This is what we don't do anymore. But how do those conversations come up?
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but most everything stems from the top, the creator of the show and showrunner and writers. Because at the end of the day, all the rest of us minions are creating their vision. So even when it's not a pilot, every single episode of TV, we have prep time. And it's pretty typical for an episode of TV to be 9 days of shooting a route, like somewhere in that range of 9 days of shooting. And so when you have 9 days of shooting, you usually have about 9 days of prep. Because while you're prepping 9 days, the other episode, like an even and odd, when you're shooting an even, the odd is prepping and vice versa. And so when you're prepping an episode, we ask the questions, like the production designer and the props department and the wardrobe department and all these people ask questions of the writers and the director, what they're looking for, basically. to put it succinctly, of course. And it all stems from there. And, obviously the showrunner might not have expertise in costume design, but if they...
What's a showrunner?
A showrunner. You know what a showrunner is, but I guess for our audience.
There you go.
A showrunner is basically the head writer and producer of a show. They are in charge of running the show. They're the showrunner. I've never met a showrunner that's not a writer. So forgive me if there are showrunners out there that are not writers. I don't know. I don't know those people. And I don't care to dig in far enough to know whether or not they are. But if you have a comment about that, leave it below. Raphael. That's an inside joke.
We do that.
But yeah, so they're typically a writer, producer on a show. There's a lot of different kinds of producers on shows, and a lot of people that you see that are producers, like listed as an executive producer or whatever producer, almost a lot of them are actually writers in the show. So, yeah, did that answer your question?
Isn't it? Thank you.
But yeah, it stems from there. So they might not have costume expertise, but if they can describe a look and a feel, then the costume designer can then get that idea in their head, and they have that expertise to then give out options. And so there might be a dialogue of like, okay, I heard what you said, and they'll show like a lookbook of like different looks, or they'll give easy known references, maybe like, oh, are you thinking kind of like J-Lo, in terms of like a style, right? And everybody knows who J-Lo is. Whether or not they paid attention to her style, maybe not, but like they'll try and throw out references that most people would know if you don't have a costume expertise. Or, they can say things like, I'm literally not a fashion person, but like couture, or, another fashion designer. Coco Chanel or something, they can, Louis Vuitton, they can throw out these brand names that basically say that this person is high end. And even if you don't know what Louis Vuitton looks like, and you don't want that person high end, you'd be like, oh, no, not absolutely not. And with Sam and Dean, I can imagine a conversation being kind of like, these guys are, I don't know, just like they are your everyday Midwest guy with flannels and leather jackets and jeans, always jeans, and just comfy clothes, Henleys, and just comfy clothes. And with that information, the wardrobe department can start putting together looks for these boys and then send that off for approval. And it's just a conversation. It's a dialogue between the creators, writers of the show. And then, there's also hierarchy within each department as well. The wardrobe designer will have their assistant designers and shoppers go out and find these types of things. And the production designer takes information from the showrunner and then designs things and has their people within their department help create that design by their lead and their decisions. So it just trickles down from there. And in my world, in the assistant director world, we get the idea from the director and the writers as far as the extras, the background actors. And it's either written in the script or the director mentions something, and then the first AD, or if the first AD doesn't want to be involved, the key second AD, myself, come up with what we think is needed there. A lady with a baby stroller, kids on bikes, whatever it is. And we hire those people through background casting. And then once we're there on the day, the second AD who's on set takes the tools we've given him, the lady with the baby stroller and the kids on bikes, and they actually design the look of it, what you actually see on the screen. Like maybe the baby stroller walks by our main characters as they cross in, and then later the boys go by on, or the kids go by on the bikes. Like they're the ones that actually put it into action, but we are the ones that gave them the kind of vibe, the neighborhood vibe, if you will. We could have also just said a bunch of men, and then that's a different vibe for your street or wherever you're at. So it all trickles down, like the decision making, the design trickles down from the top, from the showrunner and the writers and the director to the whatever your department handles. My department handles the background actors, and so it all starts from the top and it trickles down. If I decided not to put the lady in the baby stroller on the list of people to hire, then the second AD doesn't have that person in their arsenal, so to speak, to use. So it all just trickles down from there.
So there's a lot of conversations that occur about vibe and details and questions. So my initial thought, because we were talking about pilots at the beginning, was that these are conversations that happens at the very, very beginning, but it sounds like these are probably residual conversations. Mm-hmm. They might be overall vibe, but they also might be this particular scene vibe or this particular character vibe.
Absolutely.
Or if we're shooting at the Bean in Chicago versus we're shooting at random obscure alleyway, New York alleyway number 1, which is something we've joked about before because New York doesn't really have alleys. Then this is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
About fitting into a feeling or a vibe.
Yeah, and honestly, in prep, there's a lot of different meetings. There's meetings basically for every department, but one of the meetings is, not every department, sorry. Grips and electric don't need a meeting, or the camera department don't need a meeting. But there's a prop meeting, there's a wardrobe meeting, a hair makeup meeting, there's a background extras meeting, special effects, visual effects, graphics, video, stunts. Those people all have meetings. And then depending on the show, there's probably other meetings that also, there's an art meeting. Depending on the show, there might be other meetings that are needed, just based on what that show needs. But one of the meetings is also the tone meeting, because unlike in film, the directors that come in, sometimes they've never been there before. And if it's like season 11 or 15, as it, on Supernatural, if you're a brand new director, everybody else that's there knows this show better than you. Like, across the board, other than the guest star that's never worked on the show before. But maybe even them, because maybe they were reused from season 2. Who knows? So the director, you really have to teach the director what your show is about, while also it's a gentle mix where the director has to come in and try and make their vision, but also fitting into the vision of the show that already exists. And in order for that to happen, you've got to have meetings and conversations with that director so that they can understand what that show is about and what that vibe is. And one of those meetings that is accomplished is the tone meeting. And the tone meeting has showrunner, producers, director, and editors in it, in order for those that know what the tone is the best to relay to that director what it is. And it's an opportunity for the director to ask a lot of questions and put in their input and see there's a give and take there. If the director has a strong feeling about a way something should be, either the showrunners or the writers can shoot it down because it really just does not mesh well with what the vision of the overall story is, or maybe it's something that's going to affect something further down the line, few episodes from now, that the director doesn't know about. But otherwise, they'll try and give them what they want as best as they can, so that the director can feel like they have made a footprint on the show. But it's definitely a delicate balance, for sure. And some directors that I've worked with are better than others. The more experience they have, generally the better they are at doing it, just because they understand how it goes now. And actually, funny, but one of the best directors that I've worked with is a producing director on one of the Star Trek shows. I can't remember which one at the top of my head right now. But
You need to have that answer readily available.
I could look it up quickly. But he's a producing director. Is on a TV show, you have a producing director because he's the director that's there full time, and he knows more about the show than most of the directors that come in usually. They have a producing title. They help guide new directors in. They also pick up all of the things and pieces that are missed or you don't have time for. So insert units, or like stunt units maybe. A scene had to be dropped because you ran out of time, or there was a blizzard that came through town, or whatever it is, and you have to pick it up, but you can't bring in the original director for it for whatever reason. And so that producing director takes over and does those missing pieces. They also usually direct at least a couple, like an episode or two within the season, just on their own. And so the director that I worked with more recently that I really, really enjoyed. He'd been a producing director on a Star Trek show, and he really understood his assignment as a director, as a guest director, and I really enjoyed him a lot.
All right, so then, I love all of these logistics and the back ends because I was raised on TV. I'm practically the cable guy. I was raised on television. Oh, there's so many one-liners that are built into my daily conversation that I don't even realize where they come from anymore. But then you work in the field, so it's always like getting to peek behind Oz's curtain to get to talk to you about this stuff. But in the spirit of us establishing a dialogue that's going to go on hopefully many, many episodes into the future across many shows, I have to ask this question.
I was low-key being like, is this about to be a podcast of behind-the-scenes stuff? Because I don't want to be that.
I don't think we're going to be able to help it.
No, I just don't want this to become a podcast about the peek behind the curtain. Like, it can obviously be a part of it because it's part of what I bring to the show. But I don't... Right now, I just feel like I'm explaining how TV works.
Okay, so let's get real about that. I think there's three things here that are going to make this a peek behind the curtain. They're just different curtains. Number one, the fact that you work in the industry, which links to my question that I'm now not going to ask quite yet.
Sorry.
No, I think it's great. I think it's really, really great because this is our own pilots. We're having to explore what our brand is. Do you see what I did there?
I'm a marketing guy.
Number two, I watched my first Star Trek episodes in the 90s. I'm 39 years old. I was watching this a little bit as a kid, but I really picked...
You're 39?
He did that on purpose.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
She's a little younger, slightly, ever so slightly younger.
Not years at all.
Anyway, my point two is that I was in college when I found Star Trek. So I was super, super Star Wars as a younger kid. Episode 1 came out when I was a very, very early teenager. But then I really fell in love with Star Trek many years ago. So there's very little about this that is first reaction for me. Thank God there's multiple shows coming out right now. I love that portion. But in general, Star Trek for me, when you watch it for the first time, you're going to be watching something that I watched for the first time at a very different stage in life. So there's going to be a peeking behind the curtain of why this particular episode was such a big deal for me, when it may or may not be such a big deal for you now. But also, number 3, on the supernatural side, you watched these episodes for the first time many years ago, before you were in the industry. So the impact that it's going to have on me now with us is going to be different than it had on you then in your life stage back then, which is the beauty of the entertainment of television. And then also, now that you're in the industry, we get an additional insight that people who do a podcast about reacting to a TV show typically don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some thoughts I had during the pilot that I can't share because they're spoilers. But there's definitely some things where I was like, I wonder if they knew when they wrote this that this would be that storyline or whatever. Like, because I feel like sometimes it's obvious when they didn't. And that's also a difficulty with writing a show that goes on for as many seasons as it does, as this one did, is there's a lot of loose ends. A lot of loose ends and a lot of, we went down that road and realized it wasn't the road we wanted to go on. So then we just pivoted and pretended like we never went down that road to begin with. That definitely happens in this show, but it also, I am super curious. I will be super curious to talk with Eric Kripke or somebody that was there in the early days and ask them, like, did they know that this person, this later? Because in this scene, it doesn't seem like they do. That type of thing.
You never know, man.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get them on.
I very unfortunately don't know anybody that was highly connected to the Supernatural series, other than I've worked with an actor who played a significant, I would say, guest star in season 2.
No spoilers.
In season 2, I worked with him. He was a lead in a show that I worked on, and he did, in the early aughts, he did a guest spot on Supernatural. So that's the only person that I know of so far that I work. That's not true. I worked with a showrunner from Supernatural, but I don't work with him anymore.
This is why we do this.
I forgot.
This is why we don't pause the recording.
He was a showrunner in the later seasons
We've
of
just
Supernatural.
got 3 guests on our show.
But he worked at...
You heard it here.
He was a showrunner in the later seasons, so he probably wouldn't necessarily know the answer to my question about the pilot.
Yeah, but I'll tell you one thing that I have learned from talking to you and by exploring this fun little game of your industry is that if you don't know them, you know somebody who knows them.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So we'll see.
Yeah, a good friend of mine has worked with Jensen pretty extensively on The Boys.
Jensen
Ackles, he plays Dean.
Oh, Dean. Okay, yeah. To me,
you should also know a fun fact. You'll like this. Jensen and Jared, Sam and Dean, or Dean and Sam, I should say, are both from Texas.
No, well, being from Texas myself, that automatically endears me to both of them.
Yeah, they're both Texas boys.
They sound like smart men.
And I think they both live there, actually, with their families. Like, full-time. Like, they're not...
Sounds right. I know my brother and sister-in-law have both had a mission to go meet them, and they've met them both.
At conventions, yeah.
Sister-in-law's a Comic-Con type.
Yeah. I've never met them, but I hear good things.
Okay, so that being the case, and I even saw this in the pilot, so we have to talk about something.
Oh, okay. Wait, did you get your question out from earlier that I interrupted you on?
Oh, no, actually, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, with all of those things being considered that I previously mentioned many minutes ago, how do you enjoy a show? Because fiction in general, watching TV, is the suspension of disbelief. You have to be able to look at people on screen and know that this is X person. He is not the character that he's playing. But in order to be entertained, I am going to give up the idea that this is Paul Rudd for a little while. And now it is Ant-Man. So that way I can enjoy the movie Ant-Man. You have a particularly damning disposition in a lot of ways. When not only do you know that what was on screen was on camera, all of the prep work that went into it, all of these things that can destroy the suspension of disbelief for you, but additionally, you know these people.
Some of them, not most of them.
You know a lot of these. We have had so many times over the last couple of years that we've been watching a show, and we'll kick off, and a day player comes in, somebody who's only in one episode, and you're like, oh, I know that person. So once you recognize that person, once you literally have the fucking ability to text that person and say, hey, I'm watching you on TV right now, how do you suspend disbelief and still be able to enjoy that show the way that the rest of us do?
First of all, it's important to say that is one of my favorite things ever. So you're watching a show and then one of my friends pops up on TV and I go, oh, it's my friend. I love it so much. It's also a bit of a guessing game when it's not like a friend of mine, but just someone that I've worked with like for a day or two in the past and I recognize them. Like, do I recognize them because I know them, like in person know them? Or do I recognize them from another show? And then I have to go on a deep dive of IMDb and figure out, do I know them from a show I worked on? Or do I know them because I saw them in something else? It's a pretty fun game. When it happens in person, however, there's the inability to look up a name and then it just drives me nuts. But that's an aside. The answer to your question is simple. Good writing and good acting. And good show design.
Well, this is a podcast, so you have to unpack that.
When people ask me what my favorite genre is, it's not necessarily a genre. It is character-based drama is usually what I say, but it doesn't necessarily have to be drama. It is a show that really develops its character, a movie that really develops its characters and does it very well to the point that I'm really connected to those characters. And the only way to accomplish that is by good writing and good acting. It could have good writing, but the actor is so terrible that you're not connecting with them in the way that the writing intended, and vice versa. you could have bad writing and the actors acting the shit out of it. But the writing sometimes will just make you upset.
That's kind of kind of a whole subgenre is bad writing and phenomenal actors.
And so I think more than bad acting, bad writing is more upsetting to me. It's not just necessarily bad as a kind of overall encompassing word, but I think more than bad for me is lazy is a better verb. Wow. Better adjective to use. This is
the teacher, ladies and gentlemen.
This is not English class. It's lazy writing. It drives me nuts when I read an episode that I'm working on or I watch an episode where I realize that it was just straight up lazy writing. Like they had an opportunity to do it better and they didn't. And now I also, from the production side, understand there are a lot of limitations. Writers are not given free reign to write whatever they want to write. And there's a lot of people that go into the decisions about what an episode is going to be and what is going to be shown. I remember, in particular, a writer friend of mine who is also brilliant and super into Shakespeare and just amazing. There's a lot of ideas that he's had that were shot down because the studio or whoever needed to have more like action appeal or sex appeal or whatever. That was what was needed, not true heart and true storytelling. So I say I really dislike lazy writing with the caveat of I understand that writers aren't always able to write what they want to write. And sometimes they're forced into a box. Sometimes they're forced to write things they don't want to write. So I'm not coming for all the writers out there. I understand the difficulty of your job, which is why I never would want to do it because it would drive me nuts. But when I see lazy writing in shows, no matter what the reason is, it takes me out of the story. I can't get into it. So it's not my experience in the film and TV industry that takes me out of it. It is the lazy writing or bad acting, and it goes with hand in hand the world. If it's not believable, which goes hand in hand with the writing. However, there's a lot of things that go into the world too, production design as well. Or like just really, really terrible effects is enough to take me out of it too.
Yeah.
And I definitely early aughts or before that, like you give leeway because you know what they were dealing with back then. But now, like if it's something produced now and it's horrible, I'm like, no, I don't want to watch this.
Well, I feel like there's a level of respecting the technology that you have access to.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through that whenever we dig into Trek World because we've literally got 70 years of creating television. And so we've got many really great examples of them using what they've got, and they've got only practical effects because it's the early 1960s, and they did very little, and they did a really good job with what they had.
Yeah.
And then we've got other situations where they've really, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw Enterprise under the bus, Trekkies Reunite, where they were trying to do much more advanced graphics than they had in the early 2000s because we got ahead of ourselves in the early 2000s with computers. And we completely ruined plot lines because we overextended the CGI availability or whatever.
Yep.
So,
yeah, the short answer to your question is my industry experience isn't what takes me out of shows. And when I say takes me out of it means I love to feel immersed in the world. Like I love to feel like I'm a part of it in some way, not like actually a part of it, like, oh, I'm a character in the show, but like feeling just immersed in it. Like I care about this world. I care about these people and what happens to them and what happens in this world. And what takes me away from that and takes me into a spot of I don't really care anymore is things like lazy, bad writing, bad acting, bad design. It just takes me out of it. Now, there are exceptions to that rule when the show knows that it's like ridiculous, basically. And it just owns it. I don't know if I can, like, Cobra Kai.
When they own their bad, I think it's beautiful. I think it's really, really nice. It allows them a creative expression to open up and just explore it's ridiculous. We know that it's ridiculous, so we're going to have a fun time together.
Yeah.
And there's an entire subgenre of that.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times in a show that I will look at it from a production perspective sometimes. But usually that's kind of an indicator that I've fallen out of the story a little bit. Not that I'm like, oh, I'm done with this show, but like whatever's happening at that time is not more interesting to me than, oh my gosh, they just did that in one shot. Or whatever. Yeah. Like, and it's not that the story is bad in that necessarily moment, but for whatever reason, it caught my attention less than the production side. And so that does happen every now and again, not as often as you would think, probably because I am an assistant director and not a grip or an electrician or a camera guy. So an electrician might be like, oh, and they might look at the lighting a lot and try to figure out how they did it.
I just think that would further niche you down into that element.
What do you mean?
Well, because that's what I've noticed is that I've grown up on TV as a small child. I taught myself to read from Sesame Street, and I was always around TV. So this world for me has been experiential from the very beginning. But I have found, unlike anything else in my history, a unique experience in watching with you, because we will watch something like you had mentioned Fringe. We've watched all 5 seasons of Fringe together, and I've already seen the show, but watching it with you was entirely different because, number one, its episodic nature. There would be somebody who would show up, and this was the character, this was the person. You would always automatically go, hey, I know this person. I worked with them. And then first 5 minutes of the episode are lost because you're looking up their IMDb and telling me where you got them from. Or so many other situations. Everybody from Breaking Bad. We watched Breaking Bad together, but you've worked with pretty much everybody from Breaking Bad. And so it changed the entire experience.
Tough name dropping
of the shit. No, this is not my thing, except for Patrick Stewart and Sir Stewart. If you're listening, I want you on the show. That's our only rule as far as celebrities, is that if you get to work with him, then we have to talk. But regardless, it does change my experience of seeing something even that I've already seen, because we get to have a conversation that I can't have with anybody else. I can't have this kind of dialogue. And so that's why I asked, how do you stay in the disbelief in order to enjoy the show? But in retrospect, before we started doing this podcast, I went to Reddit, to the Trek community, and said, hey guys, here's what I'm trying to do. How do I do this? And actually did speak to somebody else who was also at one point working in the industry. And we had talked about that. So I find that the experience of your firsthand experience with shooting it while also still being able to enjoy it, not just the people, but also the characters, the perspective that it gives you. The questions about why did they do X, Y, and Z here in this scene or in this way, and it's a budget question, or it's a director call, or it's a studio call. It really enhances a lot of what was given to us as the final product. And I find that to be super, super interesting, which is why I'm also very interested about what's going to happen with this. As we go through Supernatural, when you know what happened and you know what's coming, and I pose theories, which I have a couple of notes about, posing predictions for the future of Supernatural.
I want to know those.
And then also as we get into Trek, because it has absolutely influenced my making these decisions on the 15 seasons of Star Trek that we're going to go through across all of the shows, which, by the way, Star Trek fans, like and comment down below. Please tell me what the hell we're going to do as far as, do we start at TOS? Do we start at Enterprise? Because it's the earliest Actually, is Enterprise? Yeah, Enterprise is definitely earlier than Strange New Worlds. So as we get into that realm, are we going to see things where Stephanie sees somebody that she's worked with before as one of the day players of the shows, one of these alien species or whatever? But also as we dig into the cinematic elements of, this was shot during 2021 and the pandemic stipulations were different. That's why these scenes were shot differently. I'm very, very excited about getting to share this world with you that I have grown up with a lot in my life, but also your unique perspective being in the industry as well.
Yeah, I don't. That's how you see it. I don't know. It for me, because it's just what I do. It doesn't seem all that interesting, I guess. I said to him during one of our brief breaks for him to get a drink, I was like, I'm just worried about this being boring. Because for me, it's just, I'm talking about work. And who likes to hear about somebody else's work that much, right? So it's
what you do.
It's a bit, I don't know. It's a bit, for me, it's not boring necessarily to talk about it, but I worry that it's like, okay, we get it. Yeah, I also think it's at some point we should watch a show that I worked on, because another thing that every once in a while I'll think about is like, I bet you there's a PA laying down in the floor of that car to give cues. Like things like that, because I did that. I was the little baby PA laying down on the floorboards of a car to be able to give actors cues and stuff, and while they're driving. And nowadays, there's probably a lot less PAs driving or laying down in floorboards. Now that we tend to just give the actor a walkie of their own. But I don't know. I don't know why we couldn't give my friend who was driving the car, or the actor, a walkie. They could have handled it perfectly fine. But for some reason, I needed to be on the floorboard of this car.
I think that would actually be... I had thought about that before. So if you're listening, let us know if you'd like us to eventually cover a show that Stephanie worked on. And we can talk about the logistics about that, and we'll figure that part out. But we could go through that element, because the idea is not necessarily just to do Supernatural and Star Trek. The idea is to take this and explore it further into areas that maybe neither of us have seen anything. So we get to do this reaction experience. I think it'd be super fun.
Yeah, I think I've always wanted to do it with you, because I thought that you would find it interesting to see, like, because now I'm not on set as much as a key second. I'm more like in an office planning the next day than I am on set. But when I was on set, I have a lot more like I still behind the scenes stuff, so it's more about the planning of it rather than on this day, this thing happened and I was standing right there or whatever, or I'm actually technically in that scene because they need to put me in the middle of it to cue an actor, that sort of stuff. So it's just more interesting, I would say, than my behind the scenes information that I have now. But I want to hear your theories, and I also want to say, I want you to tell me your favorite thing about the episode. And I want to tell you my favorite things as to why I love Supernatural.
Ooh. Okay, that's 3 very good points. Which should we do first? I really would love to hear why you love Supernatural so much, because there have been a lot of things over the last few years that I have tried to show you as, I think you'll love this. And sometimes I nail it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I absolutely bomb the hell out of it that I thought you would love. But of all the gin joints in all the world, you chose Supernatural as your one show to share with me. This is your identity that you're sharing with me. And then my predictions, based on this pilot, they're probably going to be relatively disappointing, but I'll still make them anyway.
Yeah, put them out there.
Okay. So where do you want to go first?
Let's start with your prediction.
I figured you'd go there.
Well, actually, maybe we end with the predictions. That seems to make more sense, right?
Okay.
So how about you tell me your favorite thing from the episode?
I like that they were unbridled. I have noticed that pilots are a lot of times performative. They are fitting within the realm of the 3-act sequence, and let's just do these things that are going to get attention, and it feels like a safe script. This did not. I could see from the first scene this. Yeah.
It's like a known thing of like within the first 10 minutes of Supernatural, there's a woman burning up on the ceiling.
Exactly. Yeah. Burning on top of flames, on top of blood, on top of gore, on top of it. And it's just, there's a whole lot going on in a unapologetic kind of way. And I respect that.
That's Eric Kripke for you. Well done, Eric Kripke.
Yeah, I can still see remnants of that with The Boys, which, by the way, I'm entirely caught up and entirely addicted, as much as it is embarrassing to be as addicted to that show as I am. So I have enjoyed his work a whole lot more than I realized that it was his.
That's what I feel like I have a lot of hope for you liking this show, is because you've liked Revolution, you love The Boys, and this was Eric Kripke's, I believe it was his very first baby.
Really?
Yeah. If he had another one before Supernatural, it failed because I haven't heard of it.
If there was another one, let us know in the comments down below.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure this was his very first one. And I think, if I remember correctly, like the whole idea, like the whole premise is these two brothers are going around the country fighting evil. Like that's like the main that's like the one line of the show. Mm-hmm. If you were gonna base this show in like one line, like that would be what it is. That and just family. And I've heard time and time and time again from like various interviews or whatever that I've seen, that at the end of the day, they've always said that this story goes back to the brothers. This show goes back to the brothers. And that segues beautifully into my favorites of the Supernatural and why it is my favorite show. Now, I always have been attracted to like supernatural type things. Like my favorite show when I was a kid was So Weird and Are You Afraid of the Dark and just like creepy things like that. I've always been into it. I also had nightmares because of the show Unsolved Mystery. Thanks for letting me watch that at such a young age, Mom and Dad. But I have always been had some sort of interest in that. I also love true crime. So that definitely hit for me. But more than anything else, what has made this show my favorite and still to this day, like, is so special to my heart is the reason why the show was created kind of in the first place, is that it's a story about two brothers. And the brothers, Sam and Dean, their relationship is just so special in so many ways. And I think the pilot actually highlighted already how special this relationship is before them, and which is part of the reason why I think that you would actually really enjoy this show, because the brothers are very close. They kind of were forced to be because, as you heard in the pilot, they like grew up, together in this unconventional life. And so they have a very special bond, one might say dysfunctional at some times, but, that's fine. But they also are brothers in a very realistic way, where you hear this kind of age-old picking on each other thing, or giving each other a hard time, stepping on each other's toes, slapping each other on the back of the head, just making fun of each other. And I think that was what I thought would resonate well with you, because, you do have a good relationship with your brother, but you also definitely are like Sam and Dean in that you will give each other a hard time and you will fight. I mean, especially when you were kids, obviously, not so much now, but you would fight. But at the end of the day, you're brothers. And I think that is an overall theme that I just really enjoy. And they're both very flawed characters. And that's the thing, too, is that these are very flawed human beings. They are, of course, because they grew up traumatized. They're very flawed human beings, but they're doing the absolute best that they can and doing. They make a lot of hard decisions and a lot of no-win decisions, and they just are always just doing the best that they can with what they have, and that's very relatable, despite the supernatural of it all, which is not relatable. But as characters and as humans, these two are they're very relatable, and I think that a lot of people can see themselves in them, and it's just a story between two brothers that I can really, and a lot of people really connect with. And so for me, that is why Supernatural maintains as one of my favorite shows, because they are some of the best written characters that I have seen. And yeah, you're looking at me. He has a surprised look on his face. But they're great, man.
To call someone the best written character.
Some of the best.
Yeah, that's bold. That's huge. I have nothing to go off of. I've literally only seen the pilot. That's huge.
Well, and part of it too is Jensen and Jared, right? Because you can't have a dynamic. Jensen and Jared are the actors.
Sam and Dean.
Yes.
Okay.
Jensen plays Dean. Sam.
No, we don't live in this real world where actors are playing characters. This is Sam and Dean and the car.
Yes, but the people that make them come to life are the actors, and you can't have a dynamic duo without the chemistry of actors. Like, we've all seen the show or a movie where they force a love interest. And you're like, they just don't go together. And it's because the actors themselves don't have chemistry. And there's only so much that you can fake. Now, I'm sure there are actors out there. Like, I think it's very common knowledge now that Ryan Gosling and what was the woman that played in The Notebook? His opposite? Can't remember her name. But Ryan Gosling and the woman that played the girl in Notebook, they apparently had a lot of tension. Like they weren't friendly or whatever. Maybe that's complete bullshit, but I heard that. But the thing is, they still have chemistry. Regardless if they don't like each other, they still have chemistry. You don't have to like each other to have chemistry. And Jensen and Jared have great chemistry, and they are, like, to this day, as far as I know, the actors are the greatest of friends. They were like in each other's weddings, and like they're just. This show went for as long as it did because Jared and Jensen wanted to be. I don't know what he's flicking his finger at me like I'm supposed to know what that means.
I'm just giving you checkpoints on how long the episode's been going on.
What does that mean? What does this mean?
Well, I did 111. That was an hour and 11.
Okay. Oh my God, it's over an hour. We need to wrap this up.
We're at 112 just now.
We need to wrap this up.
No, we're fine. I mean, if we're going unbridled at 112 and anybody's still listening, then they're going to hang around for longer. So
I don't know, man. But anyways, long story short, too long didn't read. You skipped ahead to the end. I love this show. I love this show because of the brothers, and part of that is the writing, and part of that is the actors.
So it's the brothers, it's the dynamic, it's that draws me into it, partially on your behalf, partially on my own intrigue, because I have suggested a few shows and movies that I thought were going to absolutely dominate with you, and they fell flat. I've had some that I thought you were going to mildly enjoy, and you loved them. And I found the one thing that carries through consistently is dynamics. So for you to come in and say, it's the brothers' dynamics that does it with me, and you cannot have, as a girl, you cannot have the brothers' dynamic that they had. Mm-hmm. You can have a brother dynamic, you have two of them, but your dynamic with them will always be sister-brother. Mm-hmm. And since I have a brother, shout out Jake,
no chick flick moments.
Can't remember the answer.
You're supposed to say jerk. Bitch.
Now I remember. I find that, and I even have a note in my episode notes that it's brothers brothering a brotherly situation like brothers. It really felt like they were driving that point home from the very beginning. Sam had left. Sam's off at university. Sam's obviously trying to do his own life. And then Dean shows back up and pulls him back in. And what I had noticed is that there seemed to be an existing routine, an existing set of rules. You know, if there's a ghost, find the body. Get rid of the body, do this. There were accountable rules to abide by. which, you know, is kind of its own thing. But then by the end of the episode, Sam could still have easily lifted out of this entire narrative until he got back at the end and his girlfriend, Jess. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jess was her name. Jess was in the ceiling just like his mom was in the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And in the fire, in the destruction, in the bailout, but also Sam was a baby when that happened. Mm-hmm. Dean, who hung around, came back in, saved Sam in all reality in both of those situations. Mm-hmm. There is a recognition of sort of a universality of laws that exists that I feel like we just got the slightest glimpse into. Because all these times during this episode, they made references, but not necessarily acknowledgement of Dracula, werewolves, ghosts, zombies. Move down the list. It feels like everything that we've heard of, it's slightly taking the Men in Black approach, is that if you've heard about it, there's probably some level of truth in it. Mm-hmm. That is my ultimate big overall prediction, is that every single bit of folklore that we've ever heard, they're going to tie into a storyline at a certain point in time. There's my ultimate prediction. And they're going to start tying in all of the Hollywood day players, so that way I can go through multiple episodes and say, I know that guy, I know that girl, I've seen them before. But it seems like there's a rule book that we're not quite aware of yet. And they just give us a glimpse into it. They give us a glimpse into the past and then into the present. And I just hope they don't go too heavily into the early 2000s as far as showing us. Because some of those graphics were horrendous.
Yeah, when the children grab the mom and it's like,
yeah, and they mold it into the floor, into a pool of blue.
Honestly, that is honestly the worst of the whole series. Every time I've rewatched the pilot, I'm like, that is so bad. I'm so sorry, visual effects people of Supernatural and the pilot. I'm not coming for you. I understand the tools that you had at the time were not the best. However, they were by far the worst of the series. And I'm sure that pilot was not... Supernatural was always kind of on the brink of extinction. So I'm sure the pilot was shot as a true pilot, not a pilot that was... It's our show that's already picked up. So it's a pilot based on the fact that it's the first episode, not a pilot as we're shipping this to people and hoping somebody picks it up. So it was probably even shot many months before the actual series was. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe in that span of time, they got a better budget.
That was going to be a
and they got maybe better technology because of that budget. So it
could have been just an extremely tight budget to shoot the pilot.
Yeah,
maybe. And then they got more budget later.
Maybe that very well could be, because that is by far the worst of the visual effects in Supernatural.
Well, there's so much of that period element, and you can make something timeless, or you can anchor it into the time period and 100% date it. Like, in fact, they had something to go do in 2005, 2006, and they had to go to the library to search. They did a Google search that came up with 0 results. Like, it dated the piece.
Well, they weren't doing a Google. They were doing a article specific to that town. Like, is there an article in the archives of that town? Is there something about it?
BFD. But I mean, I went through the newspaper. I did a microfilm search in 2005 at my university, which would still be a Google search now, regardless.
Well, there's just a lot less, because you're making it specific to archives of that town. Yep. But regardless,
you make it period.
Regardless, yes, there is definitely some things we're going to have to get through in terms of the the early aughts things. But do you want me to tell you if your prediction is correct?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, I
want to let this ride out because I'm hoping at this point that I have counterpointed the initial pilot episodes, that there are an equal number of Trekkies listening to this episode at this point, as opposed to Supernaturalies.
Supernatural fan.
Supernatural fans.
Fam.
What?
Fam with an M.
Oh, fam. Or at least it's been thought about. And because if it's not, then we're gonna have to go all the way through season 1-ish before we get to the first season of Trek whatever before we bring in my team. Because I'm gonna need some support in here because I'm gonna say some stupid things over the next couple of episodes, and I'm gonna need to hurry up and get to the point where you're making predictions and you're commenting on things that a whole bunch of listeners are just banging their head against the wall saying, how can you not understand? Although I don't know what that's going to be yet, but we're going to figure that out. So do not say anything about if I'm accurate or if I'm not accurate. The point is to enjoy the experience, to have fun with it, because we're both talking about going back and rewatching episodes from 20 years ago of whatever, and also doing so as a habitual, non-motivated. We're not trying to make it successful. We're just enjoying the experience of watching TV together.
Did you say what your favorite thing from the episode was?
I mean, I'm going to go with the brothers.
It's always
I mean, they crammed it on the front end.
Yeah.
But I will say so with an asterisk next to it. They had better, after that kind of front end, they already killed off Mom, that's fine. I get it. If they do not give me more Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Grey's Anatomy, closed that door, Walking Dead waited way too long to bring him in, and then I'm not. We better get more Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
He's coming for you, Eric Kripke.
Eric, hashtag @Eric. We're going to talk.
Oh, I just cannot wait for you to see the rest of the season. There's some great things. There's some great things that I think you're going to love, and it's going to be great. I think those that have watched Supernatural will know what I'm talking about, especially Eric Kripke. But
Eric Kripke.
Yeah.
So excited and terrified at the same time.
Oh gosh. What is the episode? I think it was called The French Mistake. Pretty sure.
No spoilers.
Well, you're not gonna. What are you gonna do? Look up The French Mistake?
I'm not speaking for the listeners.
Ugh, whatever. I think it was called The French Mistake. Yeah. So the brothers. I mean, that's always my favorite. My favorite thing of rewatching the episode was, I think, just rewatching those moments that have become so iconic, like Driver picks the music, shotgun shuts his cake hole, and the introduction of the cassette collection, and just all these like things that became either the show made it that way because they repeat it, or because the fandom just latched onto it and made it a thing. These things that became so ingrained, quotables or whatever it is, into the Supernatural fandom, like rewatching to where it started. And I loved just seeing how much, because the brothers are my favorite part, seeing in the episode how much they really, like you said, the brothers were brothering the brotherly brothers, you know, like it was all brothers, you know? And I just love anything where you see it's an episode about the brothers is usually one of my favorite episodes. So
okay,
it's a good one.
So what are you looking forward to next?
I'm looking forward to you watching more of the Supernatural episodes that are more on brand for like the series rather than the pilot, and seeing if you still are intrigued. Like, are you actually intrigued to continue watching the show? Like, other than for the podcast and for me, like if you watched that pilot, would you be like, I want to see what happens next?
Yeah, that's amazing that you said that, because that's legitimately where I was going to, is that I am 70 to 80% interested to see the next episode. But we started the episode having the conversation about, let's do it this way. And I know that for every season of Supernatural that I go through, I get to show you a season of Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I can see your excitement, because you already know what's coming. But I can also see your excitement about me experiencing it. But I can also, as you discuss it, I can feel my excitement about showing you this thing that I love so much. And I can also then feel the thing that you love so much being shared with me. So I'm so excited about the supernatural trek back and forth that we're about to do. So in that case, yes, I am super excited about seeing the second episode, which is kind of the first episode of the methodology of the actual episodic portion and not the pitch. So we're into the regular series now.
Yeah.
Starting next week. And I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to see about how the seeds that are being planted now are going to be things that we come back to whenever we start going through the first season of Star Trek that we choose to go to, and creating the dynamics between the two and reciprocating, watching one season versus reciprocating another season. I'm excited about this whole project.
I think you're more excited about showing me Star Trek stuff than I am about watching Star Trek stuff. I think that's what you're most excited.
I think you're going to love it, but also I want to get into just X, Y, and Z and all the little droplets that you've popped in about actors who are in Supernatural, who are in shows that I love, like Firefly and Man in the High Castle and episodes that we've already talked about.
But a lot of them.
I think there's a lot of that. I'm really, really excited about digging into this entire project of just sharing our sci-fi life. I think that's going to be the fun part.
Is that the name of our podcast, Our Sci-Fi Life?
I don't know. Do you want it to be?
I don't know if that actually tells what this is about, but it's an interesting title.
Okay. Maybe we'll play with it.
At workshop.
Like and comment down below.
What should we call our podcast? Thank you.
Okay.
That's about it.
We'll figure it out. Yep. So I'm hitting the capacity of all the AI transcribers, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down.
We need a line to go out on.
Make it so.
Stay sexy and watch Supernatural. Hey. I stole that from My Favorite Murder, sort of.
All right, so I guess we'll come back soon for Supernatural 102, which is called Wendigo?
Wendigo.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wendigo. And we'll...
Good one. I like that one.
All right, good.
It's memorable for me.
I'm excited.
I watched it many times.
All right. Babe, you're awesome. Okay, bye.